Hello, beautiful soul sister, and welcome back to another episode of the Soul Powered Podcast. I'm your host, Rebecca Kiger. I'm a trauma-informed master mindset and money coach, as well as a financial expert of over 17 years. I have spent my entire adult life studying the difference between successful and unsuccessful people, and I plan on sharing all of the things with you on this journey together. This podcast is called the Soul Powered Podcast because it's my desire to share with you how to create a life that is powered by your soul, not by societal standards or what everyone else in your life tells you that you should be doing, but actually powered by your soul. The reason you'd want to do this is because I believe that this is the fastest way to unlock your portal to prosperity and become what I call the wildly wealthy woman. This is the portal that once you enter it, you gain access to the prosperity, abundance, wealth, time freedom, experiences, fulfillment that are your birthright. I don't believe that you came here to build someone else's dreams. I believe you came here to live your soul-powered life and live it to the fullest. And I plan on sharing with you exactly how to do that during our time together. So thank you so much for being here. I know we're going to have so much fun together today. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Soul Powered Podcast. I'm your host, Rebecca. I'm so excited for today's conversation. I have with me an incredible guest. Many of you know that I kind of started off this podcast doing a lot of guest episodes, and then I spent a while doing a lot of solo episodes. So I think this is like my first guest episode in a really long time. And I'm so excited to have JP here with me. So I'm going to just quickly introduce him and then I'm going to turn it over. So JP Horgan is a peak performance coach who helps people unbound boundaries. As a certified life and business coach with a specialization in positive psychology, JP is an expert in installing empowering habits and mindset to gain personal mastery over the mind, the body, and the spirit. You guys know this is right up my alley. So welcome everyone, JP, to the podcast. Hi, JP. How are you?
I am great, Rebecca. Thank you for sharing this space.
Of course, I'm so excited that you're here. So let's just dive right into it. I would love to learn a little bit more. So I gave a little brief introduction here, but if you don't mind, just tell us like, who do you help and how do you help them so we can make sure people are in the right place today?
100%. So mind, body, soul, I see it in your background, and that's all what I'm about. So the truth about coaching is it's all mindset. We can call ourselves whatever kind of coach we want, but really at the end of the day, it's mindset. And so we can't see some of our own mindset issues, some of our challenges, some of our blocks. And that's why they're called blocks. They're blocking us. We can't see them. That's where coaches come in. So for me personally, I like to work one-on-one. I've done lots of groups. I'm very good at it. I share a space on Mondays for mental health, for anxiety, depression, chronic pain, and that's a group setting. Personally, though, I like the one-on-one. I like to push people individually and see them crush goals.
Oh, I love that. I love that so much. And I love that you're also into the mind, the body, and the spirit, because I think, it's kind of rare for me to have a male guest on the show, and it's not for any other reason than I guess it's this kind of aversion that I've had through the years to that like bro marketing, that hustle. I've got to grind. I've got to, no offense, but the Grant Cardones of the world, like I love him and his work, but I just don't resonate with that anymore. I did at one point in my life, but not so much anymore. And so I love that you are really taking this holistic approach to what you're doing. And I'm sure there's a reason that you're doing it this way and also helping people with their mental health, helping them with their mindset, helping with their goals. So what if we just led right into like what brought you to this place and what makes you so passionate about doing what you do?
Yeah, that's a great question. I find coaches, right? We're always, our best client is who we used to be. We figured out something along the way, and now we want to pay it forward. And so my story, I have a tumor in my spine, and thankfully it's a benign tumor, but it's right inside my spine, and it used to cause me chronic pain. Things like laughing, coughing, sneezing, breathing, all of these things were just excruciating. And so it's not even that you can't live your life or like go for a run or something like this. These are just coughing, right? Like sleeping. And so at one point, here, take a pill. That will help you. That didn't work. I tried surgery. That didn't work. We tried radiation. That didn't work. The surgery, he scraped away most of the tumor, but he said, if I go any further, you'll be paralyzed. So we couldn't do that. I've tried probably about 20 different modalities over a decade. And along the way, one pill turned into 2 to 3. Eventually, I was taking 33 pills a day for chronic pain. Right.
Whoa.
And what happens is you get depression, anxiety, all sorts of things. I isolated myself. And I think you end up taking one pill to counterbalance the other pill. And then I found this one doctor and he said, "Are any of the pills working?" I'm like, "No, they're actually making me worse." And he's like, "Well, why are you taking them?" I was like, whoa. So I was literally giving my power away to people. And so, I don't know, about 7 years ago, I stopped. I just said, I'm not doing this anymore. My son was about to turn 5, and I said, this kid deserves way better. His whole life, I haven't been able to be the father I want to be. I like going to Santa Claus parades. My wife would hold him on her shoulders, right? And I was even in a mobility scooter at one point. And so once I made that decision to change, I think kind of the universe aligns and says, "Oh, that's what you want. You should have told me a long time ago." And slowly I came off the pills and man, it's night and day. So part of the deal when I came off the pills, I said like to God, if you're there and you're real and you can hear me, I will do whatever I can to help. If I can get better, I'll spend the rest of my life helping people. And that's what I want to do. And that's what I'm doing.
Wow. Oh my God. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's a very vulnerable story. And I'm sure that that's hard. I'm sure you've shared it plenty of times by now, but it doesn't take away the fact that I think a lot of people can see themselves in that story. And I think so many of us get to that place where it is, they say like God leaves you the pebble, right, along your path. And then when you don't listen to the pebble, it's now turns into a rock and then it turns into a boulder. And so many of us are like, okay, we don't have a choice. Like we've got to make a change. And I really love that you bring up the perspective of coaching and, mindset blocks and all those things because we we don't have to allow our clients like not everyone has to wait until it gets that bad, right? Like I think a lot of people only make change, and I'm definitely one of them. In the past, I have fallen into this pattern where it's like I won't make change unless it's that bad, unless it's like life or death, like I have no other choice. So I would love to even just kind of chat a little bit about that. Like, what is a way that if someone is really maybe not at rock bottom, but they're kind of in this place where they know that they need to make some change, they know they need to work towards maybe a different goal or creating a new paradigm or whatever it is that they want to work towards and they feel themselves being blocked, what is something that you could recommend them doing that would really help them before they have to wait till they get to rock bottom?
Yeah, that's a great question. So let's look at psychology in general as a field. And so if you go way back, there was no psychology. It was all actually philosophy.
Mm.
And then around 1800s, it comes over to this side it was in Germany, but it came over here. William James started it at the end of the 1800s. And for those first 100 years, from 1896 to 1998, psychology just kind of asks the question like, okay, if somebody's wrong, how can we help them? Like people with mental health disorders, this kind of thing. And nobody ever said exactly what you just said, which is, what if somebody's kind of all right? Why do we have to wait till we hit the rock bottom to flourish? So Martin Seligman, he's the founder of a field called positive psychology, which was developed in 1998. Now, in the 60s, he had this research, and it was all about learned helplessness. And that's when someone gets beaten down so bad by their circumstances that they just say, sorry, learned hopelessness,
Mhm.
which is like when you're beaten down so bad by your circumstances that you just say, what's the point? And people give up. That was his research in the 60s. In 2018, he wrote a book called Learned Optimism, the exact opposite of that. But in the
Mm.
middle, in 1998, he posed the question that you just posed. What if somebody's already okay? How can we make them thrive and flourish? And so he developed this tool called the VIA Character Strength Survey, Values in Action. Now, the VIA Character Strength Survey, it's a 240 question questionnaire, but through it, you get your values and it's really accurate. This is the first tool I share with anyone. The website is authentichappiness.org. It's a University of Pennsylvania website. And so you get the results and they get your research. But these values, once you start to see them, you can't unsee them. So you start walking around your life looking for these values and you're like, oh, wow, that's me. And what it does, it helps you align to who you're supposed to be, who you truly are. And so once you know your values, it's a lot easier to walk the path that you want to walk, because this is an awesome conversation. I'm enjoying it. But if my wife and kids call right now and they need me to come get them, I'm out of here. And that doesn't mean I don't respect you or anything. It's just a higher value, right? So you don't have to think as much. So that would be one of the tools I would start with. But there's so many. You know
Oh,
yourself. You have it written in your background. Words are powerful, mind, body, spirit. So definitely some meditation will help calm the analyzer.
yeah. Oh my God, I love that so much. Okay, so I've never heard of this, and I'm definitely gonna go and take this survey. Is it a quiz? Okay, cool. So I'm gonna do that myself. But let's talk about what's okay. So I love this conversation around values. This is a big part of my life, but I think that this really helps people because like we're here to talk about living a soul-powered life, right? Which is like going against the grain sometimes. It doesn't always feel easy. It feels like you're going in one direction while the rest of the world is going in a different one. And I really think that values can be sort of that guidance system as well, especially for someone who's maybe working on building their intuition because that's a muscle. And I talk a lot about intuition, but not everyone is quite there yet where they know the difference between their ego or trauma and intuition or their mental health situations and their intuition, right? So values, I really feel like I want to dive down this route because I think that could be like I said, almost like guardrails or like a guidance system for people. So can you explain a little bit more about how would you use your values in everyday life to be able to, like you said, hey, I'm going to make this decision that if my wife and kids call, I've got to go. And why is that? Why is that the case? Can you kind of elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, for sure. So that's the work, right? We got to do the work. So it's not just like you take this test and it's like, oh, I should. You still have to look for it. You find it. You see where they show up. There's attached to that VIA survey, he has a model and it's just like an acronym. It's called PERMA and it stands for positive emotions, engagement, relationships, meaning, and achievement. And the idea with that is that we all have these and we need these in our lives to buffer against depression, anxiety, all sorts of stuff. And if you could have all of them at the same time, that's great. Let's take marathon, for example. For me, a marathon is the perfect example. It gives you positive emotions, you're engaging with the community, building those relationships. It gives you meaning, and you get a medal at the end. What an achievement. But you don't have to have all of these at the same time. The beauty of the PERMA model is that if your emotions aren't very positive, which happens to everyone, sometimes you feel down, that's okay. Lean into your relationships with your friends and your loved ones. And by doing this, you buffer against the mental health, anxiety, the stress that can happen. And that happens to everyone, especially like around this time of the year. And so I totally didn't answer your question. But one thing about intuition, and you're saying, how do we know? I think intuition, it comes right and slams right into the back of your head and it's hard and fast. There's no pondering or question. Is that it? Should I? No. If it's intuition coming in, it comes through you. Obviously it's some external force that's coming through you to create, and so that's how you can know if it's really intuitive or not.
I love
And
that. So, can you give some examples of maybe some of your values so we can see how this might show up in everyday life?
Yeah, so one of mine is zest. Like I love life and I love waking up in the morning. I'm really happy and excited when I wake up in the morning. One is leadership. I love to not only teach leadership, but be the example. I think Mahatma Gandhi said, be the change you wish to see in the world. And you're doing that so beautifully. So those are just a couple.
Thank you. No, that's and I received that. And I think that that again just sort of gives people this guideline of like, okay, so if we're talking about you have this value of let's say leadership, then we know that when you're making decisions every day within your business or your life, that you're sort of guided by that. It's like you're not going to show up as the follower, right? You're going to innovate, you're going to lead, you're going to be the one to kind of maybe take that first step. And even if it's scary, if we know that it aligns with that value of leadership, then we know that we're moving in the right direction. Right. So I love that. And zest, it's like, hey, if this is going to be something that's going to be fun, if it's not, on the contrary, and I feel like this is not going to be an aligned decision or a conversation to have, then we can use that value to kind of guide away from that, right? And we know what to say yes to, and we know what to say no to. So I think that's a really good distinction there too.
Yeah, for sure. There's a 24 values on that survey altogether, but they're broken into different categories. So each category might have 4 or 5 or 6, but I'll just quickly: wisdom, courage, humanity, justice, temperance, and transcendence. And then under those, let's say transcendence, you got gratitude, hope, humor, spirituality, so on and so forth.
Wow, that's awesome. I'm going to take this quiz. I'm really excited. I'm excited to dive in. It's going to be great. Okay, so take me back to so we're here to talk about living this soul-powered life, right? And obviously, you're doing that in your everyday life as well. You're helping people, and your story is incredible about how you got here. Was there like a wake-up call? Because my hope with this conversation is really just to continue to encourage people that it is possible to go out and achieve your dreams. Like, we don't have to subscribe to society standards of like what a successful life looks like. So, was there that pivotal moment where you knew that this was the path that you needed to take, and then what obstacles came up for you that you had to overcome? Because I think people need to see that like this isn't all just rainbows and sunshine, right? Like this is also, it also takes work, but what's on the other side of it is so beautiful that we get to achieve that freedom that we desire. So I know it's a loaded question, but can you share with us what that pivotal moment was and then maybe some obstacles you had to overcome?
Yeah, so definitely the moment was that when that doctor said that, he's like, you're just giving, like, not that the pills are helping. He said, are you giving your power away to the doctors? And I was. I'm like, I'm not a doctor. That guy must know exactly, right? Like, I have no idea.
Mm.
And I was like, are you giving your power away? I was like, wow. And then I heard him say, your personality creates your personal reality. And I was like,
Mm.
whoa, is that true? I'm a miserable person, and that's how it's showing up in my reality. And so, just, I think I read a book, Think and Grow Rich. That was one of the early moments. And he says about affirmations and all the woo woo that we talk about is just do the affirmation, say it in front of the mirror, dream big. And he said, you're not going to believe it, but just do it anyway. And after 3 months, you'll start to believe it. And if I didn't hear that part of it, I would have been like, this doesn't work. But I just kept doing it, and then it works. And so then, yeah, the obstacles, are they obstacles? I guess. Are they part of the journey? I think so. Steve Jobs said you can't connect the dots going forward. You can only connect them looking backwards.
Mm.
And I'm sure you can look back at your own story or some of your other guests and be like, okay. So I can see now like the things that were happening and lining up the whole way along to get me here. And at the time, I couldn't see it. At the time, it didn't feel good, but man, I went to a Tony Robbins event, and that was another game changer. He said, how can you take the worst thing that ever happened to you and make it the best thing that ever happened to you? And your listeners will know just from your story, like your story is your superpower, right?
Yeah.
Look at that.
Yeah. Oh, I love that so much. And I think it's important to talk about, those steps in the journey that we didn't feel like we wanted to continue. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've wanted to quit, right? But knowing that all of my mentors wanted to quit. I just came back from my mentor hosts a annual event, and so there was like 1,000 people. This is his big event, and I just remember there was a woman on stage who she created a lot of success really quickly in her business, and she was just sharing the story of how she had heard other people, including our joint mentor, say that they wanted to quit early on. And then she heard someone else who had introduced her to this work say that they wanted to quit early on. And then she thought of all the times that she wanted to quit early on. And even maybe not so early on. Sometimes it's far into our business that we feel that way. But what she said is, what if our mentor would have quit? Then I wouldn't be here today running $1 million business, right? And so it's like, if we think about how many people are listening or in the future will be listening, right? That if we give up now, and for all of you listeners, whatever your goal is and however many people you want to impact in this world, like think about that future person who's going to be listening to your podcast or scrolling on social media and seeing your stuff. And maybe you not giving up is the very thing that gives them permission to also not give up. And I think it's really important to, talk about those times, because I think a lot of times in this space, it looks like people have gone from like 0 to $10 million in like 2 seconds. And like, there's all these glorified stories, but like it's interesting because I've seen a lot of these people on an intimate level, and I'm like, oh, they didn't tell that part of the story. They didn't say that they were crying on their floor at night because they almost lost everything, right? They didn't say that they spent all the money that they made in the first couple of years of their business because they didn't have a regulated nervous system. Like they don't tell you that part until after the fact. And so I'm trying to be more transparent with like, hey, this is how it looks, because I don't want someone to come into this space and think that they're alone when they're experiencing those dark nights of the soul or the times that they don't want to show up, right? And so, do you have any specific stories that you feel called to share where, and even if it's just like brief, but is there something that you can think about that maybe you did experience something where you were like, yeah, I think that I don't think I want to stick this out, but you kept going?
Yeah, for sure, right? We're trying to do it, and there's something about it, like you said, those people you see that are at the pinnacle, they didn't just start there and wake up there. They work there and you don't see it. And I think marathon is always a great example because you see a guy run a marathon, it's like, wow, look at that. You didn't see the training in the middle of the snow and the rain and the waking up at 6 a.m. and doing all this crazy, like nobody sees that part of it. So it's really important. But I had a bunch. Like I almost quit a couple years ago and just right. And this is what you're saying, that the universe, it's testing you. That's what's happening. And it's like, how bad do you want it? Because some people don't and they'll quit. But it was almost a thing where like, should I keep going down this road or not? And like a couple of days later, all of a sudden, just a bunch of money that I didn't expect started coming in from like courses that I forgot about that I had online that I just totally forgot. And I was like, whoa. And it was like, okay, that to me was confirmation. And in that book, Think and Grow Rich, there's a story about this guy and he's digging for gold. And it's during the gold rush. He goes out to San Francisco area and he gets the gold. So borrows all the money he can off his friends and family, buys the machinery, and then the gold dries up. And so he just sells it to this junk collector. The junk collector brings in an engineer. The engineer found the gold that dried up 3 feet away. So that guy gave up 3 feet away from his goal. And then the message is, how close are you to your goal? What if your goal is right there? Are you willing to give up on it?
Mm.
And yeah, I believe that the universe is definitely testing us when these kind of experiences happen.
I love that you bring that up because there is a book called 3 Feet from Gold that it goes into the entire story of how that all played out. And yeah, I've read it a few times actually, because there are plenty of times where I'm like, yeah, I think I'm gonna hang it up and just, I don't know, go do something different, right? And I love that because he was 3 feet away from like one of the largest in history. Now, that person went on to become incredibly successful. Like he started, which was a good thing, right? Because he's like, I'm going to learn from this, and took it and went on to become like a massive insurance salesperson, I think it was, where he was very, very successful. But it is really interesting how you're right. Like I think that because we live in this 3D reality where like it takes time to manifest the things that we want, the universe isn't just going to give it to us right away. It's about becoming the type of person who can handle it. And I've seen
Becoming.
this. Yeah, it's like I've seen this a lot with, lottery winners or people who come into like large lump sums of money quickly or inheritances and things. And they say if you want to become a millionaire overnight, you've got to become a millionaire overnight up here first, and right within your brain and your body, because otherwise you lose it. And that happened to my father, as a matter of fact. He hit the lottery, and within 3 years he was flat broke, actually in a worse off position than he was before he hit. And so I think it's really important to also notice that if you're not at the place that you want to be, there's something that you haven't learned. There's a lesson you haven't learned. There's an embodiment that you haven't taken yet. Like there's something that is there for you. Otherwise, you would already be there. So my biggest piece of advice in this, and I'd love to hear yours as well, is like if you're feeling stuck in a position, then the biggest thing that you can do, and the biggest thing I'd invite you to focus on, is like, what's the lesson here? And as soon as you learn that lesson, you get to then kind of graduate, right? And move on from that situation. But a lot of times it's because we haven't learned whatever lesson it is, and we haven't become the type of person that can maybe hold on to what it is that we're trying to manifest. So it's really important to keep that in mind too. And I don't know if you have any advice for someone who's feeling stuck, but that's kind of my thought behind that.
Yeah, no, for sure. So depends how you believe about life, right? But maybe in your dad's lifetime, and I don't know how it ended up after, but maybe he wasn't supposed to in his lifetime. But that lesson there is your 3 feet of gold lesson. And then you take it and transform it. Intention, right? What is your intention? If you're saying out loud all the time, "Oh, I'm never lucky," or "good things never happen," that's you're sending that intention to the world. And so I wish I had an elastic, but intention, this is just a carabiner, but like if this end is where you want to be and this end is where you are now, there's space in between there. So the works good with an elastic because there's tension there. You pull back on it. So where you want to be, you have to become that person, but you're not there yet. There's a space in between, and that's why you feel in tension. But if you let go of that tension, then you can move forward and you can start to
Mm,
get towards your dream. So yeah, you're not supposed to be at where you want to be yet. You have to become someone different. And sometimes a part of this is that we're like, man, I'm not there. I can't do that. The 3 limiting beliefs, right? I'm not good enough. It's not for me. And I'm different so that I can't do that. But the person that you want to become and the person you are today, they're two different people. And there's a bridge in between. And you got to walk that bridge. Again, it's with marathon. So I guess I keep talking about marathon. Maybe I should tell you about that story. I went from a
please.
mobility scooter to
Wow.
running marathons. And a part of it is this group that I facilitate for mental health, anxiety, depression. They're very victim mindset, right? Some of them are, I'm pushing, they're moving along towards it after a couple of years, but there's very victim mindset oriented. And so I'm like, how can I just prove this to them like in real time? So I told them on January 1st, I'm going to run a marathon. And I said, I don't run. I don't know how to run a marathon. I never ran a marathon. The most I've ever ran was probably 7 miles. A marathon's 26. But I believe that I can become the person who can run a marathon. And what did that look like? Okay, reverse engineer it. Okay, I need to do this far. So I want to get up to, let's say, 22 miles by this time, 15 miles by this time, 7. And so you just slowly work towards it. And as you do that, not only are you relieving the tension of not being able to do it, but you become the type of person that can.
Oh my God, that's so impressive. That's so cool. So this happened after like all of your back situation and everything.
Yeah, so I don't know if the tumor's still there. I just kind of stopped going for MRIs because nothing's changed. I kept going maybe every 3 months for an MRI and it was the same size. It wasn't growing, it wasn't shrinking, but I don't even care. That tumor's gone. Like that's an old story, right? I got a better,
Wow.
new, way better news story.
It's incredible. It just reminds me of even the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza, which when you brought up earlier about your personality creates your personal reality. That's something that Dr. Joe Dispenza says a lot in his work. And I think it's just so true. It's such a, I know that it seems so simple, but it's not. And I'll get into like the nuances of this, but like it really truly does depend on your beliefs, whether or not it's like the man who says he can and the man who says he can't, they're both right. And but it's not a belief like, oh yeah, I believe that. Like it's a core, I believe this with everything in me. And it's like we make a decision, right? And I kind of liken it to marriage, right? You're married, I'm married. It's like as soon as you get married, nothing really changes a whole lot on the outside. But you made a decision and you made a decision where you cut off all other options. And so now you show up in the energy, you become the type of person who is married by your everyday decisions, by honoring that person, by choosing that person, choosing only that person, right? The things that we're doing as a married individual, it clearly depicts someone who has chosen and decided and believes that they are married. So I think that if we can find a way to make those types of decisions, it's like I'm deciding that I'm going to be a business owner that makes 500,000, whatever it is, right? Whatever our listeners' goals are, but it is that level of decision. And then I love where you talked about like the reverse engineering aspect of it, because we've got to plan the work and then work the plan, right? We have to be able to do that. And so, how would that version of you that has what it is that you want show up in the world? And that's how you get there. It really is that simple, but it's not always easy. Would you agree?
100%. I like that work the plan. What does Robin Sharma says? If you fail to plan, then plan to fail.
Exactly. Exactly. I love that.
And yeah, Joe Dispenza, that's who's I'm talking about. He has such a good way of explaining the science and the spirituality and bridging it. But like, I don't know if you've ever read Becoming Supernatural, but this is the book that's like, whoa, okay, this is how you do it. This is how you access what you want. This is how to manifest. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's definitely all about becoming. I have one tool I'll share with you. I use it's called bias, and it's just a framework I use with clients to do exactly what you're talking about. But it stands for belief, intention, action, and surrender. And you have to have all four. And once you do, you can manifest whatever you want. But the first is belief. If you don't believe you can't do something, you're not going to be able to do it. Just like that quote you said from Lao Tzu or Henry Ford or whoever. But like that marathon again, right? If I didn't believe on the first day that I could do it, if I had to go out and do it that day, I couldn't have done it. But I believed that I could be the person. And so that's another part of, if we're talking about manifesting, is you got to feel it right now, right? In that same book, Think and Grow Rich, they talk about prayer. And most of the time when people go to prayer, it's after something happened, already feeling lack, wishing, hoping, would have, could have, should have. And it's like, you're too late. You don't actually believe it. You're just throwing up a prayer. And then
Mm.
the opposite is like, you can approach it like, thank you, God, for getting me that sub 3 hour marathon in 2025. And I'm feeling it and I'm going and it's going to happen.
It's so true. I think that people think that prayer is like asking and being in this incessant place of like, please, please, please. But what if it's also like, no, like I'm setting this intention. Thank you in advance for the support that I'm about to receive, right? Because I think that yeah, I think people have it a little bit misconstrued about what prayer actually means. But I love the whole bias acronym. I think that's so good. And I
Mm.
think it's a really, really practical way. And I love the surrender aspect of it too, because it's like, hey, at the end of the day, if it wasn't in the cards for you to run and complete this marathon, then what are you making that mean about you? Right? It's like, are you choosing a belief that is disempowering and saying, oh, I could never do this? Or are you saying, you know what? This was the universe's path for me. Maybe I wasn't meant to do that, but who did I become along the way? What did I learn? And I think that's where the surrender can come in, is which I think most people struggle quite a bit with surrender and detachment.
Yeah, that's the
Because
hardest part.
why
You just
is
said
it
something
the
there that
hardest
you
part?
because we want control. It's the
Yeah.
analytical mind, it's the masculine, right? If you're just
Yeah.
feeling it, it's easy to surrender. I attach a theme word to every year. So maybe this is a good one starting off a new year for people. Try to live into whatever that theme word is. And so one year it was surrender. And it was so funny because it was so obvious when I wasn't surrendering. And I'm just like, phew. But then the opposite, when I did surrender, there was all sorts of magic happening, right? Like crazy. It was during COVID at the beginning. My wife was a kindergarten teacher then, and she incubated like chick eggs in our house. And so we had chicks running around our house. Right. And I'm like, but then I'm like, well, obviously I'm not surrendering. And then the second I did, it changed everything, right? It didn't change anything outside. That was still the same. But inside, my internal state, my equanimity and peace was much better. And
Mm.
you said something back there about that we choose our beliefs. And I think this is a big thing. People are just like, this is what I believe. They don't realize they're choosing it. And maybe you're choosing it intentionally, but maybe you're choosing it just because that's what your mom did or your grandma did. And so it's up to us, right? Similar with thoughts. There's two types of thoughts. There's the thoughts that just come up and you don't have to accept them. They're not necessarily true. And then there's intentional thoughts, right? An intentional thought is like, I have to have dinner at 6 o'clock today. I'm going to make this for dinner. Intentional thought. But the other thoughts, they just come through us. And we just assume that they're true. Oh, this is it. But it's not necessarily. So we have to question it. So again, back to the work. And I love that you did that last week too.
Yeah, I love that distinction between the thoughts as well and realizing that you're not your thoughts and you don't even have to believe everything that you tell yourself. I think that's a really big one that I had to learn was like, just because I'm the one who's saying it doesn't mean it's true. Right? Like, where did you, I think a really good question for that, for those who are listening and maybe struggle with this is when did I decide that? Especially when we're saying things like, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, I'm not the type of person. When we really truly hold up the mirror and without judgment look at, okay, but when did I decide that? Because at the end of the day, no one can decide that for you, even if you grew up in a household where maybe things were said to you or done to you. I mean, I've been doing this work for a long time on myself, and I'm also in therapy and have done EMDR and all the things. And I realize so often when I'm going back and like reprocessing different things, I'm like, wait a second, just because someone said that, does that actually make it true? Does it make it true that because they said that I'm not good enough or whatever it is? Like, no, that doesn't make it true. That just means that's what they believe or that's what they believed about themselves. So I love that. And also, since we're giving out book recommendations, there's the book The Surrender Experiment, which is a really good which is a really good one too. And I think for those who are struggling with surrender, struggling with attachment, struggling with control, that's a really good one. My friend and I did we decided we went to Sedona. Well, we just I just got back from Sedona actually, but we went in August as well. And she and I just made the decision we were gonna like surrender, experiment the whole thing up. And we had no itinerary and we just went with the flow and we are like, where's the universe want to send us? And it was the most I mean, to date, like one of the most transformative experiences of my life. And so I think if we can live more by that, you're right. It does allow for it's like not a whole lot's changing on the outside, but man, does a lot shift on the inside when we move into that surrender.
Yeah. Last time we spoke, did I tell you my surrender experiment story?
I don't know. I don't remember. So, okay,
All
tell me,
right.
tell us.
So, first, the book Untethered Soul. That's a great book to begin for people not knowing. That's how
Yeah.
you can, it explains so much our thoughts and everything that's happening. So, that was like the objective view that Michael Singer wrote about. Then, the surrender experiment was his subjective experience. And he talks about is it called the Temple of the Universe? This church that he wanted to build, and he built it over the decades. And if anybody doesn't know who Michael Singer is, he has WebMD. He's the guy behind WebMD. But he got this piece of land and he built this church. And then he slowly started getting all the other pieces of land around him. And so as he slowly started getting all the other pieces of land around him, then the property becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. And so I moved out here in 2020, just outside the city. We got a pond, a fireplace, and it's coming up on 5 years. But when we first moved here in January 2020, I was standing on the ice on the pond and I was just looking around and I'm like, I'm gonna own all of this one day. I was listening to the surrender experiment, and so maybe that's what was in my head, right? But listen to this, since that time, and so this is the part about surrender. It doesn't happen how you want it to, but it might happen better or
Mhm.
something. So I'm like, I want to own all of these one day. So there's one, two, three, four, five, six, seven different properties around our property. And so my my sister-in-law moves to one of them a couple years later. And now my kids literally run through the forest to get to her house. And then on the other side, grandma bought one of the houses. So we've gotten three out of the seven within 5 years. And it's just like surrender.
Wow. Oh my God, that's incredible. And you're right. You don't know exactly how it's going to work out or how it's going to play out or any of it. We don't know the how. We don't know the intricacies or, all of the different pieces. But man, is it incredible when you look back. Like you said, it's like being able to look back and see how all of the dots connected. It's so amazing. It's so inspiring. And I appreciate this. I could like chat with you all day. I know we are coming to our time today, but I really would love to just have you talk a little bit about maybe where people can find you and how currently you're working with people. I know you do a lot of one-to-one work. So what's a way that people can find you if they want to learn more about you and the work that you do and your area of expertise?
Yeah, thank you for that. Les Brown said that how is none of your business, but I'll get to the question now. So my company is called the Next Steps Academy. The slogan is your story is your superpower. And there's two reasons for that. Either whatever brought you to now is your superpower, so go harvest that and figure it out. Or if you don't like where you are today, you can create it. We can make it up. We just shared with you over the past hour how to do that. So that's how come your story is your superpower. And so that's my company, the Next Steps Academy. I also have a podcast called the Phase 4 Podcast. I talk about mind, body, and spirit with coaches and creatives. And I like to talk about where we were, where we are, and where we're going. And the reason for that is that we get to share the story of people who have done it, normal people, not the people that we're talking about up on the that were born into it, that had the money to just go and start it from the beginning, fake credentials. We're talking about normal people just doing this. So those are the two things I'm into now. Um, for your guests, I've offered a free meditation. It's just a little short meditation, but it might help somebody out there. And one other tool I would love to share before we go, especially at this time of year when we're planning for 2025 and beyond, it's called My Five. So Jim Rohn has a saying that says, you become the five people that you hang around with the most. And it doesn't have to be your mom, your dog, your cat, your aunt, your uncle. It could be people online that you don't even know. So for me, the tool is that 1 hour a day, you sit with five different mentors that you find online. So if you want to be cooking or something, go look at Jamie Oliver. If you want to become neuroscience, go look at Joe Dispenza, spirituality, Wayne Dyer, whatever it is. But you spend 12 minutes a day with these people watching videos. And so it combines for 1 hour a day. And if you do that for a month or 3 months, your whole life will change. You're going to find out that one area that you're going towards, you either open it up, it resonates with you, so pull on it a little more and explore, or you only spent 1 hour a day for a month and you're like, I'm never going near that again. I thought I liked space, but I don't, or whatever it is, right? So you can definitely reach me. I'll share my links with you, but nextstepsacademy.com and the Phase 4 podcast, which releases new episodes every Friday at 11:11 a.m.
Oh, I love that. I love that. That's a sign. All right, 11:11. So that's incredible. And I love the whole My Five. I think that's really cool. And even like there's five, business days in a week. So you could almost do one different person each day and spending an hour with them. I think that's such a good idea because you're right. It doesn't have to be someone in person. As a matter of fact, most of my circle now is not in person. The people that I learn the most from or connect the most from, and they're mostly online. So, and I'll end with this too. I got to meet Les Brown, by the way. I manifested a meeting with him. Yeah, it was insane. So I love him. He's like one of the OGs, and yeah, that was a really cool thing. That was a story for another day. But okay, so as we're landing the plane, I would love to know if there's any kind of final thoughts, anything that you want to share with our listeners as we close out today's conversation.
Yeah, for sure. The message is, and it's not just from me, I'm sure it's from you too, is that we believe in you. I believe in you. And maybe you don't believe in yourself right now. Maybe you have a dream and you don't see how you can get to it. I'll hold that vision for you. Rebecca will hold that vision for you. But reach out to one of us because we can both hold that vision and we have the tools to help you to get there. So even if you don't believe in yourself, just know that I believe in you.
I love that so much. And that's so true because, yeah, when you start to see human potential and you understand the nuances of this, it's a lot easier to look at someone and be like, yeah, these are all just stories that you're in right now. Like, let's get rid of that shit so you can step into your power because, yeah, you really start to see how limitless we actually are. That's a perfect way to end our chat. Thank you so much again, JP, for being here today. This was lovely. So wonderful. Guys, definitely please check him out and grab his meditation. You can see that he clearly knows his stuff, and I'm really excited for you guys to dive into all the resources. So definitely go check him out. Thanks again for being here. Appreciate you all, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye, everyone. Soul Sister, thank you so much for tuning in to this entire episode today. If you enjoyed this episode, would you do me a favor and leave a quick review? This allows me to reach more people, and if you found value, I know others in your life will too. Also, be sure to share this episode on social media along with your biggest takeaways so I know what resonates most with you and I can keep the good stuff coming. And if you're looking to dive into a deeper connection than this podcast will allow, consider checking out my Rise to Riches experience in the show notes below. I would love to hear how these messages have helped you take one step closer to living your soul-powered life and becoming the wildly wealthy woman. Sis, let's continue to rise together. I'll see you next time. Bye.